Good afternoon, 8th grade. It's April 19th, Sunday. One day before you go back to school, even though you're not going back to school, you're kind of going back to school. And that's Monday the 20th. So I hope you all enjoyed your Easter vacation. I surely did. Hit some golf balls in the backyard here and ate too much, and it seems to be a ongoing problem. I need to get back into my keto mode. So my working out every morning actually does me so good because, as you can see, it looks like these cameras add 5 pounds. But anyway, let's talk about Gettysburg. It's kind of like the last thing we're going to talk about in this section of the Civil War. And what we want to look at is Robert E. Lee. Okay, Robert E. Lee made two attempts on getting into the North. His first attempt was thwarted, big word thwarted, stopped by McClellan when he tried to defeat the Army of the Potomac in Northern Virginia. This was known as the Maryland Campaign. Yeah, confusing, Maryland, Virginia, but it was so close. So it was the Maryland Campaign, which also became known as the Battle of Antietam. His second invasion of the North, Lee tried to gain control to recent Confederate victories by going into the North, and he would hope that with Lincoln seeing that the Confederates were gathering this momentum and speed and strength, that Lincoln himself would negotiate for peace and get this war over. He also wanted to move the war out of Virginia and into the North because, well, the Virginia it was so ravaged agriculturally that there were no supplies, no resources for them, and they needed to get out of there because it was basically a barren land beat up by war. Lee arrives late to the Battle of Gettysburg, but his armies get into Pennsylvania in mid-June and eventually met up with Union armies in the crossroads of Gettysburg. Technically, to get into Pennsylvania, you had to go through Gettysburg. And this road to get into Gettysburg, unfortunately, Confederate troops, as they were coming into Gettysburg, there were also Union troops coming in. Now, Lee's army crossed into Pennsylvania and met up with the Union troops, and then they spurn on a battle in the first days of Gettysburg, and many people believe that the first days of Gettysburg were really nothing much but a little tit for tat, but that's really not true. Lee's armies, well, they're without shoes, they're out with food, and so they were tired and beaten, and he's unable to. Lee's armies were in this first day scattered everywhere. His first goal was to secure Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill in the south of Gettysburg. On July 3rd, Lee's armies suffered numerous casualties in what is known as Picketts Charge. Okay, now we'll get into more detail about those two things. If you look at the overall victories, not victory, or the overall outcome of Gettysburg is Lee got beat. The Union armies were defeated. Let's talk about some things, some facts about Gettysburg. Number one, it resulted in a Union victory. Number two, you could look at it as a General Meade on the Union side versus Robert E. Lee on the Confederate side. Over 165,000 soldiers were involved in this melee, and over 51,000 of those 165,000 died. Now, Gettysburg, well, it wasn't really fought over shoes. There were no shoe factories in Gettysburg. It just leads to the south. Roads to the south had to travel through there, and it's just a way that it was by coincidence that they met up in the middle of Gettysburg. Who knows? Now, the one thing is that as they were sitting on the outskirts of Gettysburg, General Pettigrew was sent by General Heth to go look for supplies. So hence, Pettigrew did say something about my guys need shoes, and I'm going to go find some or something. I'm not quite sure what he said, but his main goal was he was going through Gettysburg looking for supplies. Um, they say the first day was just not a big deal. It was over 16,000 were killed, wounded, missing, or captured on the first day of battle, on the first day of meeting up. Okay. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, one of the most famous speeches by a president, was written and prepared before he even got to Gettysburg. And the speech was what, a couple minutes long? So, and he gave this speech amongst dead bodies lying around. Could you imagine the rot, the smell? It was terrible. I wasn't there, but and lastly, they say the ghost stories of Gettysburg, they're not true. I don't believe it. I believe in ghosts. Okay, so only one civilian died during the Battle of Gettysburg, and that was poor old Virginia Wade. Virginia Wade was making bread in her house when a bullet went through her house, struck her, and unfortunately, she met her demise because of this. Another interesting fact about Gettysburg was that the females fought on both sides, and they were drawn by adventure, commitment to the cause, and an opportunity for money because they got paid. Not very much, but they got paid. So women actually fought on both sides, Union side and Confederate side. Now, Picketts Charge. Let's talk about Picketts Charge. The big Picketts Charge. Everybody hears about Picketts Charge when you're talking about the Battle of Gettysburg. You know, the little round top, big round top. All right. It wasn't even really fought by Pickett, if you really want to know. The They used a fishhook type defense, which kind of like kept Lee's armies out of the areas because as they would try to come from one side or the other, they realized that it was surrounded in them. So they were basically surrounded by Union troops. Very good strategy done by the Union Army, which protected Little Round Top and Big Round Top from actually being captured. Because if it would have been captured, then Lee's armies would have probably been victorious. Um, he actually only added between 4,000 and 6,000 soldiers of 93,000 when you're talking about Pickett's charge. Pickett's guys, what I just said, was between 4,000 and 6,000 of the 93,000 soldiers that were actually battling in Gettysburg. Pettigrew and General Trimble of the Union Army supplied the others. Um, Another amazing factor is this is really the first time we hear about General George Custer. Now, General George Custer, you say, well, where did he come from? Well, he was from the Battle of Little Bighorn, if you recall. And when you get older, you think about this. His last stand. You ever heard of George Custer's last stand? Well, General George Custer was a student at West Point who actually fought at the Battle of Gettysburg and then later on died at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. When Gettysburg was done and over, they say the wagon train taking the dead and wounded Confederate soldiers was over 17 miles long. Can you think about that? When you think about a train of wagons, horse-drawn, how long it is, it's almost 17 miles. Now, if you think about how big 17 miles is, it's quite crazy. Over 7,000 soldiers were left behind by the Union and Confederate armies, and unfortunately, the people who lived in Gettysburg, only 2,400 at the time, had to actually take care of those soldiers, burying them, etc., and giving them funerals. I don't know if they gave them funerals; they just buried them down by the Devil's Ring, everything. So they were responsible for that. And in matter of fact, in 1996, while going through Gettysburg, they did find another body of a soldier from the Civil War. They don't know if it was a Confederate or a Union soldier, but pretty much that body had been sitting there since the Civil War in 1862-ish, I would imagine. So when you're thinking about the Battle of Gettysburg, you have to say there's a great loss of life. Great loss of life in the battles of Gettysburg. It's unfortunate that it happened the way it did, and the one thing that it did do is weakened the Confederate Army leading up a couple months later to the surrendering of Confederates at the Appomattox courthouse, pretty much where the whole war began. So there you go. Now Gettysburg will follow up with another YouTube video, probably next Sunday or at the end of after your test. Did I say test? That's correct. Test. You have a Chapter 15 test on Thursday. It will open up. It will be open up for, I think, one day. So gather your information and get it done. Um, I will have a Zoom meeting on Wednesday during your block time, 9:30 to I think it's 9:30 to 10 for block 8-1, and I think it's 10:30 to 11 for block 8.2. You don't come, that's your problem. I would like to see you because none of you eighth graders come to my office hours. You're probably too busy with Beavis and Butthead. I don't know what you're doing at that time, but feel free to stop by. I will give you some insight into your test, and I miss you guys. So may God bless you all. Have a great day. I will hopefully see you in my office hours tomorrow, 9:30 to 10:30, and wish you all well. God bless.